Hi. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike.
Erika, thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
So I thought I'd start with this age-old adage or debate, whether or not leadership can be taught.
It's probably something to do with our family, our maybe friends in school, a coach or two along the way. But I don't think anybody is born with the leadership gene or the teamwork gene or the create the culture gene. And if not, and I actually think not, then it's up to us to find ways to help people, grade school on, influence of parents, help people develop, and it takes a long time. It's a hard road to begin to master fairly early on the key elements, the key capabilities of helping other people to get to a more promised land. It's learned.
Tell us your professional origin story of how leadership became so ingrained in something that you wanted to do professionally.
Here's the origin story, and like many origin stories, I'm the accidental guy. So I'm on the faculty here at the Wharton School. I was asked to join a committee that was then going to bring a new curriculum at the time into the MBA program for executives. Long story made short, we had no faculty member to teach a newly required course on leadership and teamwork. And the head of the committee, I compliment the head of the committee of being excellent at strategy and negotiation. I had pointed out that we don't have anybody to teach the darn course. And he looked at me and said, "Well, Mike, I guess you're going to have to do it." I said, "I can't do it. I don't know a thing about the topic." And he said, "Perfect. You won't have any prior prejudice or bias." So he was good. Next thing I knew, I was walking into a leadership classroom. But like every topic that any of us teach here at the Wharton School, we weren't born with that. We had to learn it, and I had to sit down and think about it, learn about it. I read about it. I spent time with people like yourself. Gradually, I learned a little bit about leadership.
Enough to teach it, and teach it really well over the years. If you can remember that first year, the first couple of years when you were teaching leadership and you were learning it along with your students in many respects, walk us through what that class was like. What were some of the topics that you covered? How did you bring these issues to life and get the students to enact leadership, not just read about it theoretically?
You know, Erika, began with a head start in the sense that the students in the executive MBA program, MBA program for executives, average age 34, 35, as you know well, they, without putting it quite in these words, had an enormous hunger for learning, mastering, developing, strengthening their own leadership. Often because they had taken over a team, maybe a division, maybe a clinic, as many were in medicine, some had become heads of law firms, and they said, "Can't believe the mistakes I made. Can you help us out?" And so, in a sense, I had a head start in that the classroom did not need a proof of concept. The people in the class, and that's true for our students now, when they arrive, they've seen great leadership, they've seen deplorable leadership. So the first point I would make is that going into a classroom, even then and unequivocally these days, you know that because you go into classrooms to teach leadership, the interest in and hunger for the principles, the concepts, the capabilities of leadership cannot be overstated. With that said, the classroom itself was good but not great for the mastery of leadership. The classroom as a venue for turning the concepts into action can be subpar. With that said, drawing as I do on cases, examples, I bring leadership speakers into the classroom, I also concluded it's really important to take students, mid-career or even undergraduates, high school students for that matter, into settings where they can feel and see the leadership moment. They can feel the moment where their own leadership is being tested or it's needed. And for that, we began to experiment very gingerly with taking our students out to the Great Civil War battlefield at Gettysburg. This, of course, is July 1, 2, and 3, 1863, a kind of turning point in the Civil War. And as you stand where some of the history-making locations were, to appreciate, for example, how critical it is to be prepared ahead of time, to be resilient when the time has come to make a decision, to be ready to act, you come to appreciate all that much more how vital it is to be prepared, to have thought through strategically what you're going to do, to have people animated and motivated to follow you when you go into battle. So the Gettysburg battlefield proved a kind of an experiment. I didn't know if it was going to work. It worked in my own experience very well in helping people become more committed to engaging with the ideas, and above all, more committed to then applying the ideas the concepts, the principles, to the workplace, or if they're still a student, and in the student organizations they may be part of. Since then, working now with what we call the McNulty Leadership Program, we have rolled out a whole series of comparable experiences. So, Erika, as you know well, we take students for a day with the New York Fire Department at its great training center on Randall's Island, East River of Manhattan, and our students go through a day of direct engagement in serving now equipment and all around them, the helmet on their head, serving in small teams going into fire combat. You have to be safe. Risk is considerable. We don't put our students in a risky circumstance there. So we have developed a program that emphasizes, for example, teamwork and risk abatement in working with the New York Fire Department. We have a program going back, I think, about 20 years now with the U.S. Marine Corps, Officer Candidate School, Quantico, the base in Virginia, about 45 minutes south of Washington. And there are students that I've been through the program under the extremely effective instruction of Marine Corps officers and drill sergeants. Our students, I've been on a team down there, I put myself through it, learn the vital importance, if you're in a small team, of everybody contributing to the team, of the team leader drawing the best out of all 4 or 5 people on the team if you're ultimately going to meet your objective.
And I think all of that is just so representative of what makes Wharton's approach to leadership really distinctive and helps us then put out into the world really strong leaders, regardless of their professional background.
And over the last 30 years, this school, your school now as dean, has, in my view, pioneered the provision of leadership learning opportunities in classwork, extracurricular settings to high school students, to undergraduates, MBA students, executive MBA students, and mid-career people for good reason. And that is the world that we live in, I think, has learned that the difference between a prospering company, a company that is going to grow but not grow as fast as it should, or a company that can adopt new technologies and one that does not, depends critically on the quality of the leadership at the top and actually throughout the ranks. So our engagement now with all of our constituencies in providing leadership development opportunities, I think, is just a direct product to how the world is calling for it, and we are trying to deliver it.
I was hired to be dean of Wharton as an external hire. How should companies think about succession planning for leadership when it comes to internal or external hiring?
You know, it's a great question because it always comes up when almost anybody is hiring. There's always let's look over our shoulder, and there's some outsiders that are good. But well, you know the data, 90% of, let's make it the S&P 500 companies, when they have a succession event, in 90% of the cases, they hire internally. And that's a good sign. It usually points to, in fact, a very good indication that the company has been concerned about leadership development. 30 years ago, very few companies except GE had a whole lot of leadership development going on. Today, everybody does. And thus, one product of a great internal leadership development, a specific educational program, or helping people move around the company to learn all the different functions before they are ready to become a totally general manager. These kinds of endeavors have become not only widespread, but they're commonplace now. And in saying that, I do point to the fact that I think companies have become, with the prodding of their boards, much better at internal leadership development, which partly explains the 90%. There are great people. Appreciate the person that you just brought up at your company. It's great. Looks like a very promising future. That said, there's also great academic research on the fact that if a company is in trouble, kind of strategically misdirected, or maybe just poorly managed, showing up in the stock price or whatever metrics you use, it's good to take a look over your shoulder and ask yourself, are there great people out there that can make up for the cultural shortcomings or the strategic shortcomings that have become endemic within our company? So quick summary is companies, much better leadership development. So I expect that 90% to stay pretty high. We're looking at on the inside. But it is, the duty of directors to make certain you're getting the best out there. And if a company's been in trouble, it's languishing, it's underperforming, that's an especially good time to take a look around.
So I have been fortunate to have been invited by you on several occasions to teach in some of your programs at the Wharton School. And as you know, my own area of expertise is in crisis leadership. As you see what's happening in the world, there are all sorts of dynamics that make it increasingly difficult for companies to be successful. How do you think about leadership in a time of crisis versus in sort of more strategic growth context?
Well, to take a step back on that, to establish a baseline, good to ask yourself, as a leader of an academic institution, as a leader of a private sector company, under what conditions does your leadership have greatest impact? A good way to sum that up, not talking how, we're really talking when. This comes out of, again, university research, as when the university, the company, the hospital, the community group is facing a difficult period. When uncertainty is high, it's unclear which way to go. Leadership has greatest consequence in a period of uncertainty and change. And not only that, if we look very carefully, this is hard research to do, but it's been done. If we look very carefully at how much difference one person can make who's elevated from the inside or maybe brought in from the outside, the statistic that for me says it all is that if we hire the right person as opposed to the wrong person, the right person can make as much as 20 to 30% difference within 1 to 3 years. Same finding for collegiate sports. Same finding for professional football. So as they bring in a new general manager or a new coach, everything else the same players, same fans, same venue. The right coach versus the wrong coach, the right general manager versus the wrong one can make as much as 20 to 30% difference. So we've really got to get it right. And I think that's increasingly so because of this uncertainty in markets and the way capital flows these days in the U.S. and abroad. So to put this a little bit more normatively or prescriptively, really important to get the formula right for the kind of leader that's going to make a difference. Every institution is different, that is true, because the impact is of scale.
It certainly is. And I think also about what's happening just in our country and what many people would describe as a void of leadership at every level. And how do we move as a society from what we're seeing, the House had trouble finding a new speaker for a period of months that was leaderless. there are so many examples of ineffective or troubled leadership. How do we, with credibility, teach our students at Wharton that leadership actually matters when all around them they're seeing such a vacuum of leadership in some respects?
And with the proviso I should have referenced earlier, that the impact of the coach at a professional NFL team, the impact of a dean or a president of a university is especially consequential in a period of uncertainty, change, and in particular during a crisis. So that itself tells me, as I've looked at the research literature that supports that is vital to reiterate that point, the conceptual framing that we can offer, and then provide opportunities for people to come to our shores, our undergraduates, our MBA students. Last time I checked, I think we have about 2,000 MBA students, several thousand undergraduates, 15,000 mid-career people, a couple of million people who are coming into our programs online. Really important for us to get the content of those programs right and to make them available to everybody who is looking to strengthen their ability to make a difference and get us all to a more promised land.
So I want to switch the conversation back to you for a minute. As you think about your career at Wharton and beyond, was there any particular student that stood out for you as someone who helped you think about your own work and life and responsibilities around leadership differently? Who has impacted Mike Useem?
I'm going to name two students, and I'm actually going to name them. They're public figures, so I think this is appropriate. One is Patricia Griffith, who is the chief executive of Progressive Insurance. By the way, a couple years ago, she was the star on the front of Fortune magazine as the Fortune 500 CEO of the Year.
I've met her. I understand why she received that designation.
And she is a terrific performer, and she's just a wonderful person. She's an alum. She's came out of our what we call our advanced management program that you teach in. And just to make an observation on her that has forever affected how I think about what you do, what our president does, what the president of the United States does, is I had asked to follow her around for a day at her headquarters outside of a little bit to the east of Cleveland, Ohio. She said, yeah, come on out. We walked into a room that was already filled up with 300 new hires at Progressive Insurance. They're huge, 40,000 employees. They're always hiring. So in comes Tricia Griffith, CEO. She stopped on the way to the front of the room, stuck out a hand, and had a conversation with maybe a dozen people on the way to the front. She said, as she then took the microphone, she says, I'm Tricia Griffith. I started here at Progressive as an adjuster many years ago. I realized sometimes you had to lift cars up to see underneath. So I became a certified lift operator, forklift operator, where you can pick large objects up, including cars. And I'm thinking, whoa, so she is, let's see, CEO. She's the CEO as they come now, but she has a blue-collar past. And I could sense in the room, and I talked to a few of the participants, that at the end of that, Tricia Griffith had just given me a lesson on the vital importance of being in touch to the extent that you can. She's got 40,000 people with those there. Last way to illustrate the same point, there is a lunchroom at the headquarters where there must be hundreds of people will come. They'll take a table. And Tricia Griffith had the habit of walking into the lunchroom, looking to a table that had 5 people seated, not 6. And she would come over and say, do you mind if I sit down with you for lunch? Everybody is looking at their neighbors, texting their partner. Mm-hmm. I can't believe I'm sitting next to the CEO. But with that repeated effort to personalize her relationship, her ability to lead the company, put her on the front of Fortune magazine as the best CEO of the year. So here's a second example, just to very quickly get back to your question. There's a person I know you know well named Alex Gorski, who had been chief executive at Johnson & Johnson for the better part of a decade. He now serves, as you well know also, on the board of Apple, of IBM, and JP Morgan Chase. So he's moved from running companies to now helping to govern countries. I personally have known Alex. He was an executive MBA student quite some time ago. We've kept in touch. He has come in many times. He's a great supporter of the Wharton School, as you know. I've had him come in many times as a guest instructor. And his impact on students is just extraordinary, as he, in his case, places an enormous emphasis on what Johnson & Johnson has always called the credo, the 302 words that provide almost a blueprint on serving patients first, families, communities, and of course shareholders are there. And as Alex Gorski comes into the classroom, better than anybody I've ever seen, he helps us understand the power of company culture to get the job done.
And I'm proud that I have had an opportunity to interact with both of them. So great examples. So we're almost out of time, and I want to just have us end on how you think about your own legacy. And you've spent years at the Wharton School. We all know your impact. How would you most like to be thought about when people reflect on your role with Wharton?
We all have a purpose. We all have a calling. And let's get clear-minded about what it should be. Let's focus on that. Let's get really determined to make the best possible impact we can. And for me personally, it's been a gift to be a faculty member here, a privilege and a gift to be here as a faculty member. But being drawn as an accidental professor into a course on leadership, I came to appreciate that whatever my legacy may be, I'm going to try as hard as I can to help high school students, undergraduates, MBA students, and mid-career people strengthen their ability to make the world a better place.
Well, you have done that with aplomb, and we are fortunate to have had you a part of the Wharton School.
Thank you.
Mike Useem, thank you so much.